Hello and welcome to this Retfurb video. On this video we are going to be recovering this Selle San Marco seat. So we get straight into it, sanding the foam in there to make it smooth for the new covering. So you have to excuse my voice a bit because I'm just getting over from a cold or something similar, so I probably sound a bit muffled than I do usually. With this seat I'm going to be using a vinyl type covering rather than real leather. Now this is not by my choice but is what I was asked to fit by the owner of the seat. He has asked me to remove the existing covering and replace it with a vinyl sheet that has been stitched with detail on it. Now you don't actually see the process of me removing the original sheet purely because I had an issue with the camera again. I don't know what's going on with it, but I managed to somehow erase that start part of removing the original covering. But I do have other videos on the channel for seat recovering and you'll see the similar process, exactly what I did on this. So here all I'm doing is just using the belt sander. I think I've got a 120 grade belt on there. I'm just going around, just smoothing out the foam. Any sort of marks and indentations that were left from the original covering, they have to be removed. Otherwise, once you fit the new one, you'll see those marks coming through. Now, the original covering had a stitch detail on it, which has obviously caused more markings on the foam than what you get on a normal plain covering. Also, with the removal of the original covering, you will end up pulling off some of the foam underneath, so there'll be bits there, chunks missing, which you have to sand down. And when I say chunks, it will only be sort of like the top layer if you're really careful. If you pull it off too quick, then you will end up causing more damage. But I took my time on this one, pulled it off as slowly as I could without causing any damage, more than I needed to. You're probably looking at sort of a millimetre taken off the surface, no more than that really. It's just really the top layer of foam just to smooth out and get the shape back. So here you can see the new covering that's going onto the seat with the detail on it. I'm now just going to lay it on top of the seat and then work out the centre mark on the foam, so it makes it easier to line it up and get it central when I'm fitting it after the adhesive is applied. So you can see that I've already got a mark there, which is the start of the detail on the seat, and now I'm just going to mark down through the middle, the centre line, and then I can follow that and lay it on and make sure it's central. Now that the line's done, I can look at covering the bottom. So I'm going to try a different technique with this from what I normally do. I'm just going to wrap some plastic underneath, covering for when I apply the adhesive so there's not too much overspray underneath. Obviously I'll have to move this out of the way when I put the sheet on top, otherwise you'll end up sticking the sheet to the plastic and then it will turn into a right nightmare. So now I'm just going to apply some spray contact adhesive to the new layer and also to the foam on the seat itself. So now I'm just going to let the adhesive tack off a little bit, just so as soon as I put it onto the seat it just grabs better. So now at this point, I'm not going to lie to you, this is the second time I attempted to do this. You can see the foam now has got some sort of black marks on it. That was just where I had to peel the old covering off, the first attempt covering that is. I sanded it all back down again, it's fine. It just looks like it might be bumpy there, but it's not. Yeah, this covering with this vinyl, I'm not sure if it's just this vinyl, which is sort of cheaper made, but it just would not form like a piece of leather would. I had no end of issues with it, trying to pull it round. As much as I tried to stretch it like I would normal leather, you just couldn't do it. So I got hold of the person that owns the seat and just mentioned it to him, and he said about slicing around the edges just to make it fold under, which I wouldn't ordinarily do because it doesn't look as nice, doesn't look as tidy. Obviously this would all be underneath anyway, but it just, yeah, it's not as nice finish as what you would get with real leather. Now again, I don't know whether it's just this piece of vinyl, maybe it's cheaply made, I don't know, but I would never use vinyl again after this, not after having this issue of it. It wouldn't pull round, you had loads of wrinkles, and also the outer piece of the vinyl, the sort of plastic part, I suppose you would say, and it's got like an inner fabric layer, which is only very thin, but I don't know if the glue was eating into it or what, but as soon as you tried stretching it, it would just separate. So it just wasn't working, so this is why I sort of had to abandon that and then start again. And now I'm going to try to put some slices in it to make it pull around better, hopefully. Again, I wouldn't normally do this, but this was requested by the person who owns the seat. So back to the actual process of doing it, you can see that I've trimmed a lot of the excess material off first before going any further. I've applied some more glue around the edges, and now I'm just sort of putting slices into it and trying to wrap it round to get it so it smooths off around all the sides and the upper surface. I found this ruler, which is actually ideal for getting down into the sides and pushing the material in between the rail and the sides of the seat. Obviously you do need to be careful when you're using something like this that you don't pierce the material, whether it's this or real leather. You just want to be careful that you're pushing it down and not actually pushing through it and causing a cut there. It's these parts which are the worst sections of trying to form any part of a seat covering, the front nose and the rear corner parts of it, because they're the most heavily sort of contoured sections of the seat that require the most stretching to get it round and get it smooth. So with this vinyl, this is where I had the most issues. To be honest, it's a shame that this embroidery wasn't done on a nice piece of leather. Now I know you can get some cheaper pieces of leather, but if it was done on a nice piece of leather, and then it would have made this whole refurb so much nicer. The finished product would have been so much better. We could have made it a lot more factory sort of finish with the folding around the edges and everything like that. Now I know you will sometimes get sort of wrinkles in places anyway, regardless of what you do, but it would have been a lot tidier finish than what we get with this one. But there you go, we just sort of persevere with this and hopefully make the best of it. I'm just applying some super glue to some of these areas just to make sure that it's held nice and tight. I'm just a little bit worried because of the material that it's not going to stick down quite so well here for the amount of material that's there. So I'm just applying some of this glue, which should hold it in place better than what the other one would. Then I'm just using this to press it down to make sure it's a nice tight bond. Now moving around to the back of the seat cover, I'm now going to just make some slices and then just trim it up a bit and try and make this fit as best as I can with this material again. I'm having to make these slices just to help it form around these tighter curves. I think if I did do this again, I think what I probably would do is trim it tighter to the material and then make almost like shark teeth in it, if that makes sense. So when you wrap it over, there's less material on there. I'm not sure if that would make it better, but I think I would probably give that a go next time. Not that I am planning to do another seat with vinyl covering, but just as sort of hindsight on what I've done on this. Again, on this rear section, I'm just having to use super glue again just to hold down some of these extra tabs that I've had to cut purely to make it stick down properly. I'm just a bit worried the other glue is not going to hold it in place with the amount of material that it's wrapped around underneath. You'll also see that with the edge of the vinyl material, there's almost like white lines. This is because you've got a fabric layer underneath the vinyl, which you wouldn't have with real leather because it would be the same colour all the way through. So what I'm going to have to do with that is just use some fabric dye and just touch it in with a brush just to hide it. Again, it's only underneath the seat, so it's not going to be that noticeable, but I just don't like the fact that it's left there. I like to try and do the tidiest job as I can with what I have to work with. So you can just see here that I've got a little pot with the fabric dye in. I'm just using a brush to go around and just touch in all those edges. And now I'm finished doing that, I'm now going to work on putting the heat press vinyl onto the outside of the seat covering. Once again, this process is made a lot harder using the vinyl material for the seat covering and then having to heat press these on top. So I had a piece of scrap material which I did a sample first before I attempted to put it on the actual seat itself, and straight away when I did it, it marked the material of the heat. So what I'm going to try to do with this is be very careful and just use the tip of the iron rather than using the flat surface as much as I can to do it. So I'm just hoping doing it that way it minimises the marks onto the vinyl. I'm still using a covering to protect it using some heatproof paper that I've got, so that should help prevent as much as possible the damage on the seat covering. But I did tell the guy again who owns the seat just so he knows the potential risk, and he was happy for me to carry on with it. Luckily, after the process was completed and I'd heat pressed it all on, there was only a very small amount of damage at the front, which just sort of smoothed out the texture finish of the vinyl. So that was the only damage really. It wasn't really that noticeable, so I was quite lucky with this. Now I'm almost getting to the end of this refurb now. As you can see that it's come out pretty well, to be fair. Not exactly how I would have liked, and the material was just a nightmare throughout the whole process. And from that, again, I will never be using vinyl again to cover a seat. I'll only ever use leather. It was only that this guy asked me if I could help him out and do it and give it a go, But I think ultimately he probably wishes that he had used proper leather as well rather than the vinyl. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video, it's really appreciated and I hope you liked it. Please like and subscribe and we'll see you on the next one.